And so I was kind of surprised, but I just like pointed at them and yelled, "It's a Japanese person," in Japanese.
Oh, hello everyone and welcome back to MisodogTV channel. And today we have a special guest.
Hello.
And then we'll be hearing about her everyday life and why she came to Japan and such. So first off, can we get your name, self-introduction, so name, age, all the good stuff.
Okay, so my name is Florin, and right now I'm 26, but I will be turning 27 in a few months. So I'm currently an ALT, an assistant English teacher on the JET program. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that sounds exciting. Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, I like it.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been here for 4 years, and I'm on my 5th year now.
Oh.
And I wouldn't have stayed if I didn't enjoy it.
Obviously you came to Japan for the JET program, but what drew you to, like, oh, I want to go to Japan, or I want to work in Japan?
So since I was quite young, maybe even about 5 or 6, I watched like Sailor Moon and other anime, but I don't think I realized that it was Japanese until maybe my first year of middle school. And a little after that, I started watching more anime and reading manga, and also becoming interested in Japanese music. So that interest kind of continued, and when it was time to choose college and what to study in college, so I decided to major in Asian studies and minor in Japanese.
So it's pretty much the Japanese culture that got you into the whole
pretty much
interest in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting. Now that you're working in Japan now, you have an idea of, you worked for 4 years. How is it working with Japanese teachers and other workers?
When I first came here, I was a little scared because I had heard all these stories about how Japan is so strict. If you read like JET program blogs or Reddit or like forums and stuff online, there are also a lot of horror stories of like the Japanese teachers who teach English who don't speak English, or who are really rude to the ALTs. But I haven't had any type of experience like that at all.
Oh, okay.
The town that I work in, I work at the Board of Education.
Mm-hmm.
I'm based there, and then every day I go to whatever school I'm scheduled to from there.
Mm-hmm.
So I work pretty closely with the people in the Board of Education, as well as with the teachers in the schools.
Okay.
And everyone's really friendly.
Okay. So have you worked in the, you're from the States, have you worked in the States for a while before going to JET, or part-time or anything of the sort?
I went on JET immediately after I graduated college, and I went to college right after high school.
Mm-hmm.
But I had part-time jobs from high school until graduating from college. I worked at a grocery store.
Okay, and how was your, I'm asking this because, how is the difference between Japanese colleagues and, US colleagues in terms of how they work, the atmosphere and such?
I think in Japan it's definitely more formal.
Oh.
Maybe where I live, it's not as formal as I expected, or as it had been portrayed to me by, the media or whatever, or like other people, what they had told me. So it's not as stuffy as I thought it would be. But I think in America it's definitely more casual.
Mm-hmm.
Not just the way people dress, but also the way they sort of interact with each other, and the way they interact with customers even is, I think in America, people try to be more friendly with customers.
Okay.
And sort of treat them like a friend.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas here, it seems to me that they treat them like a very honored guest. And they're much more polite and respectful. And maybe they're also friendly, but in a sort of different way than in America.
So, working in Japan, in terms of, what about language, communication? Have you had any issues or, difficulties?
When I first came to Japan, I had studied Japanese in college for about 3 years.
Oh.
I had also spent 2 semesters abroad in Japan, and my last semester of college I did a homestay. So even though at that time I wasn't taking any Japanese classes, I was speaking Japanese daily.
Mm-hmm.
I had already had a lot of speaking practice, but one difficulty that I encountered was that there's a lot of school-related and office-related terminology that you don't learn in Japanese class.
Oh, yes.
And that I had not learned. So I had to adjust to that. And luckily, everyone who worked with me was pretty patient. Even like the teachers, I would have to have meetings with teachers to discuss lessons, and most of them didn't really speak English. So I would have to figure out how to explain a game or an activity that I wanted to do in a way that they could understand. And so it definitely took some trial and error, but they were very patient and very nice, and we'd like draw pictures if we couldn't understand each other. But definitely it's gotten easier as the years have gone by, because I've picked up more and more Japanese.
You work at a school. How are the differences between Japanese students? I don't think you taught in the U.S., but as a student in the U.S., is there any differences between the two?
Yeah, I was only actually in the U.S. for my last 2 years of high school and for university, and maybe first grade, but I don't really remember that so well. But I think I have friends who are teachers in the U.S. and I've heard stuff. I think in general, as a whole, I think Japanese students are a bit more well-behaved. From junior high school, there's a very strong sense of discipline that is sort of reinforced not only by each teacher but also by the school as a whole. There are a lot of rules. They kind of tend to be a bit more disciplined than American students. But we definitely do have some students who act out or do things they're not supposed to, and I haven't really had any issues to the point where I've needed to have them be really disciplined. And usually if they do something, I'm like, come on. What are you doing?
Come on guys, really? You want to do this?
Yeah, come on, Or I just stare at them and then they're like, oh, I'm sorry.
You work at a school, you do all these activities, so how's your everyday expenses? I'm sure people are who are interested in coming to Japan are like, can I live off of my salary? How much do I spend on this and that? So.
I think the jet salary is livable. It depends kind of how you like to live your life. I think for me, rent in Hokkaido is quite cheap.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
So probably the amount that I'm paying for basically a 2-bedroom apartment would be in Tokyo. You would maybe be able to get 1 room for that same amount.
So how much is your rent right now?
So I pay 5 mon a month, so 58,000 yen, which is actually kind of high as far as jet rents go, because a lot of jets live in teachers' housing, or depending on the situation, they might live in a really small apartment. I didn't really have a choice in where to live. They provided it for me. I think that's the case with a lot of jets, but I get a rent subsidy.
Oh, nice.
Because if you live in teachers' housing, you generally pay 1 mon or something, or even less in some situations. But a lot of people who live in that don't get a subsidy. I do get a subsidy, so maybe 85% of my rent is paid for. They give me extra in my paycheck. Yeah, that's pretty rare, I think.
What do you plan on doing after jet? Do you have any ideas, or what you want to do?
Yeah, I don't really want to go back to America right now because healthcare is a mess in America, and I'd like to not go bankrupt if I get sick. So that Japan is nice. National health insurance.
Indeed.
Available to everyone. It's very cheap to get sick in Japan.
Oh yes.
Yeah. There's so much going on in America right now. Even the situation with coronavirus is really scary.
We don't have to go into it if you don't want to.
Yeah. So for now, I think I'd like to stay in Japan. The reason I initially wanted to come to Japan, aside from also just being interested in the culture and wanting to work here, was also I felt that after college my Japanese wasn't quite where I wanted it to be. So, and even now, it's not quite where I want it to be. So I think I would like to stay in Japan until I'm satisfied with how much I can speak the language. So probably at least a couple more years. It kind of depends.
I think this last year of jet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So after jet, do you have any idea what you want to go into, in terms of job? You want to come to Tokyo, but do you have any idea what you want to do?
I would be okay with teaching, ALT again, as long as the salary is livable. I have student loans back home, so I'd like to be able to pay those and also eat, and have a little fun here and there. Probably, I'm kind of okay with anything. I don't really like desk jobs, sitting at a desk all the time. I like to have a variety of things that I can do, but I think I want to do something more international. I definitely want to use Japanese, but I can also speak
Oh.
So, and English obviously. So it would be cool to be able to use different languages or at least deal with different types of people from
Right.
different places. It'd be interesting.
Oh yeah, that sounds pretty exciting.
I don't really know what a good timeline is because for the JET program you have to apply super ahead of time.
Oh yeah.
Like almost a year ahead of time. You start the application process. But for other jobs, maybe it's not so.
It might be a bit different, the
big.
timeline and such.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, if you want, you can always check out our MisoDog business channel.
I will. I definitely
Where it has
will.
information on finding a job in Japan. Though it might not be for mid-career people, but still there's a lot of useful information
Yeah.
that I found for them. You know, living here for 4 years, what are some things that you like and what's some things that you don't like about Japan?
There's a lot of things I like about Japan. People here are pretty friendly and sometimes interesting to talk to. And sometimes if you even just talking to random people, you can sort of get some like interesting or unexpected perspectives on things. I like a lot of the pop culture and like stuff like that. So I'm really into Japanese fashion and more like subculture stuff and music, and even like a lot of the art is really interesting here. Things like that. I really like Japanese food as well. It can get a little, everything seems to be fried in Japan.
Yes.
And a lot of people say they lost weight when they moved to Japan. That wasn't the case for me. It was the opposite because everything is rice and fried. Yeah, I like Japan, I guess.
That's good to hear. I mean, you're here. But what are some things that you know not too fond about in Japan?
As a obviously foreigner, it can get a little annoying when people just randomly come up to talk to you or randomly start speaking to you in English, which sometimes I'll go to a shop and I'll try to order something and the clerk will like start talking to me in English, but because I'm not like expecting English, my brain just doesn't process it and I'm like, what? And so I just keep talking in Japanese and then they'll reply again in English and it'll take me, if I understand at all, it'll take me a few seconds and I feel kind of bad because it's not as if their English was bad. Sometimes,
You're just not expecting it.
Yeah, I just wasn't expecting it and it's kind of like, what? In a lot of situations, my Japanese is probably better than their English, so it's probably easier to just use Japanese. That can be a little frustrating, or just random people coming up to you saying, where are you from? Or when you say like, hello, and someone says, oh, your Japanese is so good. It's like, oh, I appreciate that, but I've said one thing to you. It can get a little annoying. Yeah, and sometimes also if you go to a shop or like you try to go to a restaurant, they won't let you in if you're not Japanese. And like some places have signs that say no foreigners, but other places don't have anything. And I've definitely had situations where I've gone into a restaurant and I start speaking Japanese to them, so it's not like a language issue.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we're full, and I'm like, no, you're not. Like I can tell. It's like 4 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, you're not full. But I mean, there are people in the world who face less discrimination, so it's not that big of a deal. It's just like in the moment, it's like, oh, really? Can't we just all be cool?
Have you noticed, things changing a little bit since you first came here, as 5 years ago?
Yeah, things have definitely changed. Especially where I lived, I didn't expect that to be really any foreigners aside from like ALTs, but actually there are a lot of foreigners, and because it's a rural area, there are a lot of like programs with other countries to bring over like farm workers and stuff. So there are a few Chinese people who live in my town. I'm friends with a farmer and he has some Chinese employees. There are some Thai people. And aside from just those programs, there's also that area even though it's really rural, it actually has a lot of foreigners.
Oh wow.
And so I was kind of surprised at that. Yeah, I think Japan's definitely becoming more international, and I think like without taking into account foreigners, Japan is much more diverse and varied than even Japanese people. Yeah, I think people just need to be a little open-minded.
Okay, and hopefully in the future that will be the case more and more, as more and more, international people come to Japan.
Yeah.
And people get exposed to, I guess rural Japanese people aren't as exposed to, or weren't as exposed to international people as before, I guess.
Yeah, if you live in a big city, I mean, it's expected that there'll be more international people. It was funny though, maybe about a month or 2 ago, I was walking home from my job and I was like by this park and these kids pointed at me and yelled, "There's a foreigner!" in Japanese. And I was kind of like, I've lived here for 4 years. Are you like new in town or something? Like, I'm pretty sure everyone knows I exist by now. I'm also not the only one.
Oh, okay.
Like there's 2 other ALTs in my town and one of them lives in the town as well and has been here for 2 years. And before me, there was always like, there's been an ALT in the town for the past 20 years or so.
Okay.
So it's not like, completely new concept there. And so I was kind of surprised, but I just like pointed at them and yelled, "It's a Japanese person," in Japanese.
Alright, so anything you want to share to the audience, tips about coming to Japan?
One thing about money is I guess people think that Japan is really expensive, but in some ways I think it is. It kind of just depends where you live, but I think compared to the States, it's not necessarily, well, at least where I'm from, the East Coast area, I don't think it's that different in terms of that, and so definitely don't let that scare you. If you want to live the same way you did in your own country, then obviously that's going to be expensive, because even if you just think about food, even in the past couple years since I've been here, a lot of stuff has become more widely available. Like I can make Korean food, kind of like American style food, pretty easily without just from like the grocery store. Whereas before, there were certain things you couldn't find so easily. So it's definitely become a lot more easy to cook non-Japanese food. But yeah, I think you just have to be willing to kind of change how you're going to live if you move to a different country.
Alright, well, thank you for, coming here and sharing your story and your experiences about living in Japan. Good luck in the future. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button below and subscribe to our channel for more videos such as this, as well as other topics in the future. Alright, thank you again, and
Thank you.
Goodbye everyone, and then thank you.
Goodbye.
And what was the reaction? I want to hear this.
I think they were with their dad or something, and he was just like, "Oh, I'm sorry." He was